"It is the monkey people that we follow now," said Baloo.
"Beyond doubt, then, it is no small thing that takes two such hunters on the trail of the monkey folk," Kaa replied as he swelled with curiosity. "The trouble is this, Kaa. Those nut-stealers and pickers of palm leaves have stolen away our man-cub, of whom thou hast perhaps heard," said the Black Panther. "I heard some news from Iki the porcupine of a man-thing that was entered into a wolf-pack, but I did not believe. Iki is full of stories half-heard and very badly told."
"But it is true. He is such a man-cub as never was," said Baloo. "The best and wisest and boldest of man-cubs, my own pupil, who shall make the name of Baloo famous through all the jungles. And besides, we love him, Kaa."
"Our man-cub is in the hands of the monkey people now," said Bagheera, "and we know that of all the jungle people they fear Kaa alone." "They have good reason," said Kaa. "Now whither went they with the cub?"
"The jungle alone knows. Towards the sunset, I believe," said Baloo. "We thought that thou wouldst know, Kaa."
"I? How? I take them when they come in my way, but I do not hunt them." "Up, up, up! Hello, hello, hello! Look up, Baloo of the Seoni wolf pack!"
Baloo looked up to see where the voice came from, and there was Chil the kite, sweeping down with the sun shining on the upturned flanges of his wings. It was near Chil's bedtime, but he'd ranged all over the jungle looking for the bear and had missed him in the thick foliage. "What is it?" said Baloo.
"I've seen Mowgli among the monkey people. He bade me tell you I watched. The monkey people have taken him beyond the river to the monkey city, to the cold lairs. Good hunting, all you below."
"Full gorge and a deep sleep to you, Chil," cried Bagheera. "I will remember thee in my next kill, and put aside the head for thee alone, O best of kites."
"It is nothing. The boy held the master word. I could have done no less."
And Chil circled up again to his roost. "Oh, he's not forgotten to use his tongue," said Baloo with a chuckle of pride. "To think of one so young remembering the master word for the birds too, while he was being pulled across trees. Now, we must go to the cold lairs." They knew where that place was, but few of the jungle people ever went there because what they called the cold lairs was an old deserted city lost and buried in the jungle, and beasts seldom use a place that men have once used. Besides, the monkeys lived there, as much as they could be said to live anywhere, and no self-respecting animal would come within eyeshot of it, except in times of drought, when the half-ruined tanks and reservoirs held a little water. "It is half a night's journey at full speed," said Bagheera, and Baloo looked very serious. "Well, I will go as fast as I can," said the bear anxiously. "We dare not wait for thee. Follow, Baloo. We must go on the quick foot, Kaa and I." Baloo made one effort to hurry, but had to sit down panting, and so they left him to come on later. In the cold lairs, the monkey people were not thinking of Mowgli's friends at all. They'd brought the boy to the lost city and were very pleased with themselves for the time. Mowgli had never seen an Indian city before, and though this was almost a heap of ruins, it seemed very wonderful and splendid. Some king had built it long ago on a little hill. Trees had grown into and out of the walls, the battlements were tumbled down and decayed, and wild creepers hung out of the windows of the towers in bushy, hanging clumps. There was a ruined summer house of white marble in the centre of the terrace, built for queens, dead 100 years ago. The domed roof had half fallen in and blocked up the underground passage from the palace by which the queens used to enter. The walls were made of screens of marble tracery, and as the moon came up behind the hill, it shone through the open work, casting shadows on the ground like black velvet embroidery. Sore, sleepy, and hungry as he was, Mowgli could not help laughing when the monkey people began, 20 at a time, to tell him how great and wise and strong and gentle they were, and how foolish he was to wish to leave them.
"We are the most wonderful people in all the jungle," they shouted. "Now, as you are a new listener and can carry our words back to the jungle people so that they may notice us in future, we will tell you all about our most excellent selves."
Mowgli made no objection, and the monkeys gathered by hundreds and hundreds on the terrace to listen to their own speakers singing the praises of the monkey people. And whenever a speaker stopped for want of breath, they would all shout together, "This is true, we all say so." Mowgli nodded and blinked and said, "Yes," when they asked him a question, and his head spun with a noise. "Do they never go to sleep?" he said to himself. "Now there is a cloud coming to cover that moon. If it were only a big enough cloud, I might try to run away in the darkness." That same cloud was being watched by two good friends in the ruined ditch below the city wall. For Bagheera and Kaa, knowing well how dangerous the monkey people were in large numbers, did not wish to run any risks. The monkeys never fight unless they're 100 to 1, and few in the jungle care for those odds.
"I will go to the west wall," Kaa whispered, "and come down swiftly with the slope of the ground in my favor."
Would that Baloo were here," said Bagheera, "but we must do what we can. When that cloud covers the moon, I shall go to the terrace. They hold some sort of council there over the boy."
"Good hunting," said Kaa grimly, and glided away to the west wall.
That happened to be the least ruined of any, and the big snake was delayed a while before he could find a way up the stones. The cloud hid the moon, and as Mowgli wondered what would come next, he heard Bagheera's light feet on the terrace. The Black Panther had raced up the slope almost without a sound, and was striking right and left among the monkeys who were seated round Mowgli in circles of 50 and 60 deep. There was a howl of fright and rage, and then, as Bagheera tripped on the rolling, kicking bodies beneath him, a monkey shouted,
"There is only one here! Kill him! Kill him!"
A scuffling mass of monkeys, biting, scratching, tearing and pulling, closed over Bagheera, while 5 or 6 laid hold of Mowgli, dragging him up the wall of the summer house and pushed him through the hole of the broken dome. A man-trained boy would have been badly bruised, for the fall was a good 15 feet. But Mowgli fell as Baloo had taught him to fall, and landed on his feet.
"Stay there," shouted the monkeys, "till we've killed thy friend, and later we will play with thee, if the poison people leave thee alive."
"We be of one blood, ye and I," said Mowgli, quickly giving the snake's call. He could hear rustling and hissing in the rubbish all round him, and gave the call a second time to make sure.
"Even so, down hoods all," said half a dozen low voices.
Every ruin in India becomes sooner or later a dwelling place of snakes, and the old summer house was alive with cobras.
"Stand still, little brother, for thy feet may do us harm."
Mowgli stood as quietly as he could, peering through the open work and listening to the furious din of the fight round the Black Panther, the yells and chatterings and scufflings, and Bagheera's deep hoarse cough as he backed and bucked and twisted and plunged under the heaps of his enemies. For the first time since he was born, Bagheera was fighting for his life. Baloo must be at hand. Bagheera would not have come alone, Mowgli thought, and then he called aloud, "To the tank, Bagheera! Roll to the water tank! Roll and plunge! Get to the water!" Bagheera heard, and the cry that told him Mowgli was safe gave him new courage. He worked his way desperately, inch by inch, straight for the reservoirs, hitting in silence. Then, from the ruined wall nearest the jungle, rose up the rumbling war shout of Baloo. "Bagheera!" he shouted. "I am here!" He panted up the terrace only to disappear to the head in a wave of monkeys. But he threw himself squarely on his haunches and, spreading out his forepaws, hugged as many as he could hold, and then began to hit with a regular bat, 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 like the flipping strokes of a paddle wheel. A crash and a splash told Mowgli that Bagheera had fought his way to the tank where the monkeys could not follow. The panther lay gasping for breath, his head just out of water, while the monkey stood 3 deep on the red steps, dancing up and down with rage, ready to spring upon him from all sides if he came out to help Baloo. Kaa had only just worked his way over the west wall, landing with a wrench that dislodged a coping stone into the ditch. He had no intention of losing any advantage of the ground, and called and uncalled himself once or twice to be sure that every foot of his long body was in working order. Then he came straight, quickly, and anxious to kill. The fighting strength of a python is in the driving blow of the head, backed by all the strength and weight of his body. If you can imagine a lance, or a battering ram, or a hammer, weighing nearly half a ton, driven by a cool, quiet mind living in the handle of it, you can roughly imagine what Kaa was like when he fought. A python, 4 or 5 feet long, can knock a man down if he hits him fairly in the chest. And Kaa was 30 feet long. His first stroke was delivered into the heart of the crowd round Baloo, and there was no need of a second. The monkeys scattered with cries of, "Kaa! It is Kaa! Run! Run!" Kaa was everything that the monkeys feared in the jungle. They ran, stammering with terror, to the walls and the roofs of the houses, and Baloo drew a deep breath of relief. His fur was much thicker than Bagheera's, but he'd suffered sorely in the fight. Bagheera came up from the tank, shaking his wet sides. The monkeys leaped higher up the walls. They clung round the necks of the big stone idols and shrieked as they skipped along the battlements. "Let us take the man-cub and go," Bagheera gasped. "They may attack again." "Kaa, we owe thee, I think, our lives, Bagheera and I," said Baloo. "No matter. Where is the manling?" "Here, in a trap. I cannot climb out," cried Mowgli. The curve of the broken dome was above his head. "Take him away," said the cobblers inside. "He dances like Mao the peacock. He will crush our young." "Ah," said Kaa with a chuckle. "He has friends everywhere. Stand back, manling, and hide you, O poison people. I break down the wall." Kaa looked carefully till he found a discoloured crack in the marble tracery showing a weak spot. He made 2 or 3 light taps with his head to get the distance, and then, lifting up 6 feet of his body clear of the ground, sent home 6 full-power smashing blows, nose first. The screenwork broke and fell away in a cloud of dust and rubbish, and Mowgli leaped through the opening and flung himself between Baloo and Bagheera, an arm round each big neck. "So this is the manling," said Kaa. "Very soft is his skin, and he is not so unlike the monkey people. Have a care, manling, that I do not mistake thee for a monkey some twilight when I have newly changed my coat." "We be of one blood, thou and I," Mowgli answered. "I take my life from thee tonight. My kill shall be thy kill if ever thou art hungry, O Kaa." "A brave heart and a courteous tongue," said Kaa. "They shall carry thee far through the jungle, manling. But now go hence quickly with thy friends." The moon was sinking behind the hills as the 3 slipped off through a gap in the walls to the jungle. "Now," said Bagheera, "jump on my back, little brother, and we will go home." Mowgli laid his head down on Bagheera's back and slept so deeply that he never waked when he was put down by Mother Wolf's side in the home cave. Tiger, Tiger. Now we must go back to the first tale. When Mowgli left the wolf's cave after the fight with the pack at the Council Rock, he went down to the ploughed lands where the villagers lived, but he would not stop there because it was too near to the jungle, and he knew that he'd made at least one bad enemy at the council. So he hurried on, keeping to the rough road that ran down the valley, and followed it at a steady jog-trot for nearly 20 miles, till he came to a country that he did not know. The valley opened out into a great plain, dotted over with rocks and cut up by ravines. At one end stood a little village, and at the other the thick jungle came down in a sweep to the grazing grounds. When Mowgli came to the village gate, he saw the big thorn bush that was drawn up before the gate at twilight pushed to one side. He sat down by the gate, and when a man came out, he stood up, opened his mouth, and pointed down it to show that he wanted food. The man stared and ran back up the one street of the village shouting for the priest, who was a big fat man dressed in white with a red and yellow mark on his forehead. The priest came to the gate, and with him at least 100 people, who stared and talked and shouted and pointed at Mowgli. "What is there to be afraid of?" said the priest. "Look at the marks on his arms and legs. They are the bites of wolves. He is but a wolf child run away from the jungle." Of course, in playing together, the cubs had often nipped Mowgli harder than they intended, and there were white scars all over his arms and legs. But he would have been the last person in the world to call these bites, for he knew what real biting meant.
"By my honour, Meswa," said 2 or 3 women together, "he is not unlike thy boy that was taken by the tiger."
"Let me look," said a woman with heavy copper rings on her wrists and ankles, and she peered at Mowgli under the palm of her hand. "Indeed, he has the very look of my boy." The priest was a clever man, and he knew that Meswa was wife to the richest villager in the place. So he looked up at the sky for a minute and said solemnly, "What the jungle has taken, the jungle has restored. Take the boy into thy house, my sister, and forget not to honor the priest who sees so far into the lives of men." The crowd parted as the woman beckoned Mowgli to her hut, where there was a red lacquered bedstead, a great earthen grain chest with curious raised patterns on it, 6 copper cooking pots, and an image of a Hindu god in a little alcove. She gave him a long drink of milk and some bread, and then she laid her hand on his head and looked into his eyes. "Natu, oh Natu," she said. Mowgli did not show that he knew the name. "Dost thou not remember the day when I gave thee thy new shoes?" She touched his foot, and it was almost as hard as horn. Mowgli was uneasy, because he'd never been under a roof before, but as he looked at the thatch he saw that he could tear it out at any time if he wanted to get away, and that the window had no fastenings. "What is the good of a man," he said to himself at last, "if he does not understand man's talk? Now I am as silly and dumb as a man would be with us in the jungle. I must learn their talk." So as soon as Meswa pronounced a word, Mowgli would imitate it almost perfectly, and before dark he'd learned the names of many things in the hut. There was difficulty at bedtime, because Mowgli would not sleep under anything that looked so like a panther trap as that hut, and when they shut the door, he went through the window. "Give him his will," said Meswa's husband. "Remember, he can never till now have slept on a bed." So Mowgli stretched himself in some long, clean grass at the edge of the field, but before he'd closed his eyes, a soft, grey nose poked him under the chin. "Phew," said Grey Brother. He was the eldest of Mother Wolf's cubs. "This is a poor reward for following thee 20 miles. Thou smellest of wood smoke and cattle, altogether like a man already. Wake, little brother, I bring news." "Are all well in the jungle?" said Mowgli, hugging him. "All except the wolves that were burned with the red flower. Now listen. Shere Khan has gone away to hunt far off till his coat grows again, for he's badly singed. When he returns, he swears that he will lay thy bones in the Waingunga." "I also have made a little promise," said Mowgli, "but news is always good. I'm tired tonight, very tired with new things, Grey Brother, but bring me the news always." "Thou wilt not forget that thou art a wolf," said Grey Brother anxiously. "Never. I will always remember that I love thee and all in our cave. But also I will always remember that I have been cast out of the pack." "And that thou mayest be cast out of another pack. When I come down here again, I will wait for thee in the bamboos at the edge of the grazing ground." For 3 months after that night, Mowgli hardly ever left the village gate. He was so busy learning the ways and customs of men. First he had to wear a cloth round him, which annoyed him horribly, and then he had to learn about money, which he did not in the least understand, and about ploughing, of which he did not see the use. One evening the priest told Meswa's husband that Mowgli had better be set to work as soon as possible, and the village headman told Mowgli that he would have to go out with the buffaloes next day and herd them while they grazed. No one was more pleased than Mowgli, and that night, because he'd been appointed, as it were, a servant of the village, he went off to a circle that met every evening on a masonry platform under a great fig tree. It was the village club, where the headman and the watchman and the barber and old Buldoo, the village hunter, who owned a Tower musket, met and smoked. They told wonderful tales of gods and men and ghosts, and Buldoo told even more wonderful ones of the ways of beasts in the jungle, till the eyes of the children sitting outside the circle bulged out of their heads. Mowgli, who naturally knew something about what they were talking of, had to cover his face, not to show that he was laughing, while Buldoo, the Tower musket across his knees, climbed on from one wonderful story to another, and Mowgli's shoulders shook. Buldoo was explaining how the tiger that had carried away Meswa's son was a ghost tiger, and his body was inhabited by the ghost of a wicked old moneylender who died some years ago. "And I know that this is true," he said, "because Purun Das always limped from the blow that he got in a riot when his account books were burned. And the tiger that I speak of, he limps too, for the tracks of his pads are unequal."
"That tiger limps because he was born lame, as everyone knows," said Mowgli. "To talk of the soul of a moneylender in a beast that never had the courage of a jackal is child's talk."
"Oh, it is the jungle brat, is it?" said Buldoo. "If thou art so wise, better bring his hide to Kaniwara, for the government has set 100 rupees on his life. Better still, do not talk when thy elders speak." Mowgli rose to go.
"All the evening I've lain here listening," he called back over his shoulder, "and except once or twice, Buldoo has not said one word of truth concerning the jungle, which is at his very doors."
Buldoo puffed and snorted at Mowgli's impertinence. The next morning at dawn, Mowgli went through the village street, sitting on the back of Rama, the great herd bull, and the slaty blue buffaloes, with their long backward-sweeping horns and savage eyes, rose out of their byres one by one and followed him. Mowgli drove them onto the edge of the plain where the Waingunga river came out of the jungle, and then he dropped from Rama's neck, trotted off to a bamboo clump, and found Grey Brother. "Ah," said Grey Brother, "I've waited here very many days. What's the meaning of this cattle-herding work?"
"I am a village herd for a while," said Mowgli. "What news of Shere Khan?"
"He's come back to this country, and has waited here a long time for thee. Now he's gone off again, for the game is scarce, but he means to kill thee."
"Very good," said Mowgli. "So long as he's away, do thou or one of the 4 brothers sit on that rock, so that I can see thee as I come out of the village. When he comes back, wait for me in the ravine by the dak tree in the center of the plain. We need not walk into Shere Khan's mouth." Over the next few weeks, Mowgli would lead the buffaloes out to their wallows, and day after day he would see Grey Brother's back 1.5 miles away across the plain, so he knew that Shere Khan had not come back. And day after day he would lie on the grass listening to the noises round him and dreaming of old days in the jungle. At last, a day came when he did not see Grey Brother at the signal place, and he laughed and headed the buffaloes for the ravine by the dak tree, which was all covered with golden red flowers. There sat Grey Brother, every bristle on his back lifted. "He's hidden for a month to throw thee off thy guard. He crossed the ranges last night, hot foot on thy trail," said the wolf. "His plan is to wait for thee at the village gate this evening, for thee and for no one else. He is lying up now in the big dry ravine of the Waingunga." "Has he eaten today, or does he hunt empty?" said Mowgli, for the answer meant life or death to him. He killed at dawn a pig, and he's drunk too. Remember, Shere Khan could never fast, even for the sake of revenge.
Eaten and drunk. And he thinks that I shall wait till he has slept. If there were but 10 of us, we might pull him down as he lies. These buffaloes will not charge unless they wind him, and I cannot speak their language. Can we get behind his track so they may smell it?
Oh, he swam far down the Wingunga to cut that off, said Grey Brother.
Mowgli stood with his finger in his mouth, thinking.
The big ravine of the Wingunga that opens out on the plain not half a mile from here. I can take the herd round through the jungle to the head of the ravine and then sweep down, but he would slink out at the foot. We must block that end. Grey Brother, canst thou cut the herd in two for me?
Well, not I alone, but I've brought a wise helper. Grey Brother trotted off and dropped into a hole. Then there lifted up a huge grey head that Mowgli knew well, and the hot air was filled with the most desolate cry of all the jungle, the hunting howl of a wolf at midday.
"Akela," said Mowgli, clapping his hands. "I might have known that thou wouldst not forget me. We have big work in hand. Cut the herd in two, Akela. Keep the cows and calves together, and the bulls and the plough buffaloes by themselves."
The 2 wolves ran in and out of the herd, which snorted and threw up its head and separated into 2 clumps. In one the cow buffaloes stood, with their calves in the center, and glared and pawed, ready, if a wolf would only stay still, to charge down and trample the life out of him. In the other, the bulls and the young bulls snorted and stamped. Though they looked more imposing, they were much less dangerous, for they had no calves to protect. No 6 men could have divided the herd so neatly. Mowgli slipped onto Rama's back.
"Drive the bulls away to the left, Akela. Grey Brother, when we're gone, hold the cows together and drive them into the foot of the ravine. Keep them there till we come down."
Mowgli's plan was simple enough. All he wanted to do was to make a big circle uphill and get at the head of the ravine, and then take the bulls down it and catch Shere Khan between the bulls and the cows, for he knew that after a meal and a full drink, Shere Khan would not be in any condition to fight or to clamber up the sides of the ravine. It was a long, long circle, for they did not wish to get too near the ravine and give Shere Khan warning. At last, Mowgli rounded up the bewildered herd at the head of the ravine on a grassy patch that sloped steeply down to the ravine itself. From that height, you could see across the tops of the trees down to the plain below. But what Mowgli looked at was the sides of the ravine, and he saw, with a great deal of satisfaction, that they ran nearly straight up and down, while the vines and creepers that hung over them would give no foothold to a tiger who wanted to get out.
"Let them breathe, Akela," he said, holding up his hand. "They've not winded him yet. I must tell Shere Khan who comes. We have him in the trap."
He put his hands to his mouth and shouted down the ravine, and the echoes jumped from rock to rock. After a long time, there came back the drawling, sleepy snarl of a full-fed tiger just wakened.
"Who calls?" "I, Mowgli. Cattle thief, it is time to come to the Council Rock." "Down. Hurry them down, Akela. Down, Rama, down." The herd paused for an instant at the edge of the slope, but Akela gave tongue in the full hunting yell, and they pitched over one after the other, just as steamers shoot rapids, the sand and stones spurting up around them. Once started, there was no chance of stopping, and before they were fairly in the bed of the ravine, Rama winded Shere Khan and bellowed. "Ha ha!" said Mowgli on his back, and the torrent of black horns, foaming muzzles, and staring eyes whirled down the ravine like boulders in flood time. They knew what the business was before them, the terrible charge of the buffalo herd, against which no tiger can hope to stand. Shere Khan heard the thunder of their hoofs.
picked himself up and lumbered down the ravine, looking from side to side for some way to escape. But the walls of the ravine were straight, and he had to keep on, heavy with his dinner and his drink, willing to do anything rather than fight. The herd splashed through the pool he'd just left, bellowing till the narrow cut rang. Mowgli heard an answering bellow from the foot of the ravine, saw Shere Khan turn. The tiger knew if the worst came to the worst, it was better to meet the bulls and the cows with their calves. And then Rama tripped, stumbled, and went on again, over something soft, and with the bulls at his heels, crashed full into the other herd. "Quick, Akela, break them up, scatter them, or they'll be fighting one another. Softly now, softly, my children, it is all over." Akela and Grey Brother ran to and fro, nipping the buffalo's legs, and though the herd wheeled once to charge up the ravine again, Mowgli managed to turn Rama, and the others followed him to the wallows. Shere Khan needed no more trampling. He was dead, and the kites were coming for him already. "Brothers, that was a dog's death," said Mowgli, feeling for the knife he always carried in a sheath round his neck, now that he lived with men. "But he would never have shown fight. His hide will look well on the Council Rock. We must get to work swiftly." A boy trained among men would never have dreamed of skinning a 10-foot tiger alone, but Mowgli knew better than anyone else how an animal's skin is fitted on, and how it can be taken off. But it was hard work, and Mowgli slashed and tore and grunted for an hour. Presently, a hand fell on his shoulder, and looking up, he saw Buldu with a Tower musket. The children had told the village about the buffalo stampede, and Buldu went out angrily, only too anxious to correct Mowgli for not taking better care of the herd. The wolves dropped out of sight as soon as they saw the man coming. "What is this folly?" said Buldu angrily. "To think that thou canst skin a tiger! Where did the buffaloes kill him? It is the lame tiger too, and there is 100 rupees on his head. Well, well, we will overlook thy letting the herd run off, and perhaps I will give thee one of the rupees of the reward when I have taken the skin to Kaniwara." "So thou wilt take the hide to Kaniwara for the reward, and perhaps give me 1 rupee?" said Mowgli. "Now it is in my mind that I need the skin for my own use." "What talk is this to the chief hunter of the village? Mowgli, I will not give thee 1 anna of the reward, but only a very big beating. Leave the carcass." "Akela," said Mowgli, "this man plagues me." Buldu found himself sprawling on the grass, with a grey wolf standing over him, while Mowgli went on skinning as though he were alone in all India. To do Buldu justice, if he'd been 10 years younger, he would have taken his chance with Akela, had he met the wolf in the woods. But a wolf who obeyed the orders of a boy was not a common animal. It was sorcery, magic of the worst kind, thought Buldu. He lay as still, expecting every minute to see Mowgli turn into a tiger too. "Maharaj, great king," he said at last in a husky whisper, "I am an old man. I did not know that thou wast anything more than a herd boy. May I rise up and go away, or will thy servant tear me to pieces?" "Go, and peace go with thee. Only another time, do not meddle with my game. Let him go, Akela." Buldu hobbled away to the village as fast as he could, and when he arrived, he told a tale of magic and enchantment and sorcery that made the priest look very grave. Mowgli went on with his work, but it was nearly twilight before he and the wolves had drawn the great skin clear of the body. "Now we must hide this and take the buffaloes home. Help me to herd them, Akela." The herd rounded up in the misty twilight, and when they got near the village, Mowgli saw lights and heard the conches and bells blowing and banging. Half the village seemed to be waiting for him by the gate, and a shower of stones whistled about his ears. The villagers shouted, "Sorcerer! Wolf's brat! Jungle demon! Go away! Shoot, Buldu! Shoot!" The old Tower musket went off with a bang, and a young buffalo bellowed in pain. "More sorcery!" shouted the villagers. "He can turn bullets! Buldu! That was thy buffalo!" Meswa ran across to the herd and cried, "Oh, my son, my son! They say thou art a sorcerer who can turn himself into a beast at will. I do not believe, but go away or they will kill thee. Buldu says thou art a wizard."
Mowgli laughed a little short, ugly laugh. "Run back, Meswer. This is one of the foolish tales they tell under the big tree at dusk. Farewell, and run quickly, for I shall send the herd in more swiftly than their brickbats. I am no wizard, Meswer. Farewell." The buffaloes were anxious enough to get to the village. They hardly needed Akela's yell, but charged through the gate like a whirlwind, scattering the crowd right and left. "Fare you well, children of men," shouted Mowgli scornfully, "and thank Meswer that I do not come in with my wolves and hunt you up and down your street." He turned on his heel and walked away with the lone wolf, and as he looked up at the stars, he felt happy. No more sleeping in traps for me. Let us get Shere Khan's skin and go away, Akela. The moon was just going down when Mowgli and the two wolves came to the hill of the Council Rock, and they stopped at Mother Wolf's cave. "They've cast me out from the man-pack, Mother," shouted Mowgli. "But I come with the hide of Shere Khan to keep my word." Mother Wolf walked stiffly from the cave with the cubs behind her, and her eyes glowed as she saw the skin. "I told him on that day when he crammed his head and shoulders into this cave, hunting for thy life, little frog. I told him that the hunter would be the hunted. It is well done." "Little brother, it is well done," said a deep voice in the thicket. "We were lonely in the jungle without thee." And Bagheera came running to Mowgli's bare feet. They clambered up the Council Rock together, and Mowgli spread the skin out on the flat stone where Akela used to sit, and Akela lay down upon it, and called the old call to the council. "Look! Look well, O wolves!" Exactly as he'd called when Mowgli was first brought there. The pack came to the Council Rock and saw Shere Khan's striped hide on the rock and the huge claws dangling at the end of empty feet. "Look well, O wolves! Have I kept my word?" said Mowgli. And the wolves bayed, "Yes." And one tattered wolf howled, "Lead us again, Akela! Lead us again, man-cub! For we be sick of this lawlessness, and we would be the free people once more." "Nay," purred Bagheera, "that may not be. When ye are full fed, the madness may come upon ye again. Not for nothing are ye called the free people. Ye fought for freedom, and it is yours. Eat it, O wolves." "Man-pack and wolf-pack have cast me out," said Mowgli. "Now I will hunt alone in the jungle." "And we will hunt with thee," said the 4 cubs. So Mowgli went away and hunted with the 4 cubs in the jungle from that day on. Letting in the jungle. It is not easy to change one's life all in a minute, particularly in the jungle. The first thing Mowgli did when the pack had slunk off was to go to the home cave and sleep for a day and a night. Then he told Mother Wolf and Father Wolf as much as they could understand of his adventures among men, and Baloo toiled up the hill to hear all about it, and Bagheera scratched himself all over with pure delight at the way in which Mowgli had managed his war. Mowgli, his head on Mother Wolf's side, smiled contentedly, and said that for his own part he never wished to see or hear or smell man again. "But what?" said Akela, cocking one ear. "But what if men do not leave thee alone, little brother?" Mowgli looked at him questioningly. "When that yellow thief's hide was hung up on the rock," Akela went on, "I went back along our trail to the village, stepping in my tracks, turning aside, lying down, to make a mixed trail in case one should follow us. But when I'd fouled the trail so that I myself hardly knew it again, Mang the bat came hawking between the trees and hung up above me. Said Mang, 'The village of the Man-Pack where they cast out the man-cub, hums like a hornet's nest. He said that the red flower blossomed at the gate of the village, and men sat about it carrying guns. Now I know that men do not carry guns for pleasure. Presently, little brother, a man with a gun follows our trail, if indeed he be not already on it." "But why should he?" said Mowgli angrily. "Men have cast me out. What more do they need?" "Thou art a man, little brother," Akela replied. "It is not for us, the free hunters, to tell thee what thy brethren do, or why." Suddenly Bagheera sprang to his feet, thrust up his head as far as he could, sniffed, and stiffened through every curve in his body. Grey Brother followed his example quickly, keeping a little to his left to get the wind that was blowing from the right, while Akela bounded 50 yards upwind and, half crouching, stiffened too. "Man!" Akela growled, dropping on his haunches. "Buldoo," said Mowgli, sitting down. "He follows our trail. Come, let us see what this man means toward us." And followed by the others, he cut across noiselessly through the jungle at right angles to Buldoo's path, till, parting the undergrowth, he saw the old man, his musket on his shoulder, running up the trail of overnight at a dog trot. Presently Buldoo came to where Akela had gone back and mixed it all up. Then he sat down and coughed and grunted and made little casts around and about into the jungle to pick it up again, and all the time he could have thrown a stone over those who were watching him. Then a little knot of charcoal burners came down the path, and naturally halted to speak to Buldoo, whose fame as a hunter reached for at least 20 miles around. They all sat down and smoked, and Bagheera and the others came up and watched, while Buldoo began to tell the story of Mowgli, the devil child, from one end to another, with additions and inventions. He told how he himself had really killed Shere Khan, and how Mowgli had turned himself into a wolf, and fought with him all the afternoon, and changed into a boy again, and bewitched Buldoo's rifle, so that the bullet turned the corner when he pointed it at Mowgli, and how the village, knowing him to be the bravest hunter in Seoni, had sent him out to kill this devil child. But meantime, the village had got hold of Meswa and her husband, who were undoubtedly the father and mother of this devil child, and had barricaded them in their own hut, and presently would make them confess they were witch and wizard, and then they would be burned to death.